kick off because we're roughly to time. So let's make a start to this. And by way of introduction, I'm Jamie. I'm the strategic advisor to leading digital transformation specialist C Learning. I'm also a business founder, entrepreneur, and advisor to several different boards. And probably one of the best things I get to do with my day is I get to meet extraordinary people doing remarkable work that matters all over the world. So I get to meet some of the best business founders and best business leaders and organizational leaders all over the world. And today is no exception to that. I usually do a little bio introduction to my special guests when I'm at this point of the introduction, but today I'm going to do something a little bit different, mainly because I don't want to steal the thunder of our fabulous special guest today, Ronan Wall, who is the chief executive and co-founder of an amazing learning platform for organizations called Dosen. And I'm going to do something a bit different as well, because I'm going to ask Ronan if he'll be generous and kind enough to entertain us with a little bit of his journey and background into doing what he does today, because I've had the privilege of knowing Ronan for quite some time. And when I first got to know Ronan, I was absolutely in awe of his journey, his expertise, his insights, and his journey is quite unusual. It's a remarkable one that is definitely not a story that you'd normally hear. Ronan has helped to scale some of the largest companies in the world that you will hear about shortly, and because they're household names, and which has resulted in him doing what he does today. But before all of that, Ronan, if I can ask you to kick us off really by being kind enough to share with us and walk us through a little bit of your personal journey, going right back to before the big names that you helped to build. How did you get into that? And before you were sort of the founder of Dosen, where you are today, and what key moments inspired you along the way to create and rethink a workplace learning platform that you've gone on to create today? Because I think you've got some amazing insights to share. So if you'd be kind enough, would you mind sharing a bit about your personal journey by way of starting the conversation today?
Yeah, of course, Jamie, and thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to join you today. Yeah, I tell the story more often than I thought I would be with lots of people, because my background is actually in online gambling, which has absolutely nothing to do with what I do today. And because I'm working with a lot of American audiences, I also have to preface it with gambling is a perfectly acceptable career choice in Ireland, where I'm from. So I'm based in LA today, which is where I'm calling from. But let me go all the way back. I started gambling. My mother kills me for this. I started gambling when I was about 14, not because I was into gambling. I was into sport, and I discovered probability. And the most fun you can have with those two things is by trying to beat the bookie. But they wouldn't let me bet because I was too young. So my mother used to go into the bookmakers and bet for me, and I'd make a little pocket money out of it. Fast forward a few years, and as I came out of college, I met two professional gamblers who were setting up a company in Cork in Ireland. And I was on the founding team of Matchbook way back when. And we went from pre-product to just north of 1.2 billion a year in turnover. Wow. In 4 years. And I was subsequently acquired by I'm not sure if I can give his name, but he owns at least one Premier League football club. So an absolute, so much fun as a first start of my career. And then I went from there into another small online gambling company, or what was small at the time, called Paddy Power. I was online COO. There was 100 of us in the team. And again, it was just so much fun. But within 7.5 years, we had built it to be the world's biggest online gambling company. It made 5,000 people. So I think in those first kind of 12 years of my career, even though they're all in online gambling, I really got to see every stage of an organization and its growth and development, which was incredibly fortunate to do. Yeah, it was within that context that the genesis for Dosen began, which I'm happy to jump into unless you've got any online gambling questions, Jamie, other than who's going to win the Grand National.
Well, you also played a role, of course, in another very well-known international business where I think you were head of product manager, possibly. Was that what you had at Ticketmaster, your title?
Yeah, so I ran strategy, I ran revenue, and a few other things. Heavily involved in, excuse me, the introduction of a new product that essentially Not sure if you've been to a gig in the last little while, but if you have your Ticketmaster app and you've got your rotating barcode on your digital ticket, that was me. So that was fun as well. So yeah, Ticketmaster app for Paddy Power. That was my first kind of foray over here in LA before I started Dosen.
What a journey. And I said to you previously, Ronan, that firmly categorizes you in my world as an overachiever. It's an extraordinary journey. And I said to some people that I know are either going to be joining us live today or watching this later that it was so worth listening to your journey there, because it's not every day you get to meet somebody who's gone on the journey that you've got. And your intro there segues in beautifully really to what I want to delve into next, which is, given all of that background that you've just outlined, and you mentioned that the genesis, the idea was starting to form for Dosen, and even back in those days when you were scaling what we now know to be multi-billion-dollar businesses. Where do you think that the traditional learning models and platforms and processes in those organizations that you've experienced on your journey fall short? Because obviously you've hit on something that's a gap with Dosen, that's doing something very different to the other leading learning platforms out there. So just talk a little bit about where you think the others fall short and how that's led to the creation of Dosen.
Yeah, and I might even talk to my own experience a little bit, because I think the concept for Dosen really came from when I was in Paddy Power. When I joined the company, my team, I had about 30 people in my team. And I'm terrible. I love winning awards. I'm some egotistical part of me, and we were just winning all the awards, and we were super, and our numbers are green and everything was going beautifully, and my ego was having the time of its life. But within 2.5 years my team had grown to 250 people, and it was the exact opposite. It was an absolute disaster. Like, I probably should have been fired. I think I had enough credit in the bank to just like for them to allow me to dig my way out of the hole that I'd created. But in short, like, the quality was all over the place. We weren't hitting our numbers. Standards were poor. We were churning really good people. And at the time, it's a difficult thing to figure out. But in hindsight, what I realized was I was trying to manage a team of 250 with the same structures and learning and processes that I'd had in place when I had a team of 30. And it just doesn't work. And that was really kind of a penny drop moment for me. And I kind of went a little bit deeper. I read a lot of books at the time, and there's a particular book called Tribal Leadership that I really enjoyed. And in Tribal Leadership, it talks about how tribes form and they continue to grow, and it's very organic, and information is passed relatively easily because you just overhear things. And it's all good until you kind of hit this 50 number, and then you hit 100 number. And what happens is the glue of the tribe starts to break down, because the best analogy I can give is probably like a dinner party, or if you're at the pub with your friends. If there's 3 of you, there's one conversation happening and you're all in it. If there's 7 of you, there's probably at least 2 conversations. It's like 4 people are on one conversation, 3 on another. And as you grow, the conversations increase and silos start to appear, and people start to form their own thoughts and opinions. So if you think about that within the context of a business, as you hit that 50, 100 mark, now you've got pockets of people maybe in different countries, or maybe some are remote and some are in the office, or some are working on one product, others on a different product. But it starts to break down a little bit, and the things that just worked just stop working. And it can be really difficult. It's kind of like this silent debt that you start to carry. Everyone's aware of tech debt. We think about people debt, and it's this people debt that you start to carry, because my opinion of what our strategy is might be slightly different to yours now, because we're not in the same room, or we don't spend all day chatting. And so you just start to carry this debt, and at some moment it starts to become a real blocker for your ability to scale and grow your organization. And so this is kind of became my new obsession. So within Paddy Power, it happened to me very directly, and I started to try and affect change across the organization then. And similarly, when I went into Ticketmaster, I saw repeating patterns again. And so when I decided to start Dosen, it really was a no-brainer for me. I'm hugely passionate about organizational development and people development, and I'd seen so much of it, and this just seemed like an absolute enormous nut to try and crack. So so that was the genesis for it. And to your actual question, Jamie, in terms of like what's what are kind of what's in market today that isn't working, I would say lots of people are doing lots of good work. I've met so many really good people trying to solve this. And if you think, I'll just give you one example. Mentorship is a very effective learning methodology. And the history of mentorship is it came about because if you have one really good person who understands your organization, the culture, and you have someone who does not, what better way but to connect them so that one can learn from the other. And now you start to upskill those individuals so that everyone starts to think the same way. So logically it makes sense, but it just really struggles to scale. And no offense to any operators in the market, but I think the technology that's out there has not done a very good job of supporting organizations in being able to scale that. So that was kind of our first fire at Dosen, really, was can we improve this? And the industry average engagement rate in mentorship programs is somewhere between 2 and 5%. We're running at north of 50%. And so we tackled this, started with the same problems as everyone else, started to crack the nut, and saw some value. But at the end of the day, I don't know if we can go any higher because it's a form of learning that is just difficult to scale. And so that was really the genesis for us and how we started in our journey. And we've kind of gone from there into the concept of kind of supported programmatic learning courses, and of course the dawn of AI. And I would say kind of 2.5, 3 years ago was just music to our ears, because it really allowed us to take what was still relatively manual, kind of cumbersome, low levels of engagement, and actually leverage AI to turn this into something that is just enormously effective, with considerably lower levels of effort. So that's kind of the journey we've been on for the last few years, and it brings us to where we are today. And we just think of ourselves almost as like Claude for training. That's kind of how we think about ourselves right now.
That's absolutely brilliant, and some great insights shared there. And when you were talking earlier just now, you reminded me of that quote. I forget who said it, but somebody said once that the biggest problem with communication is believing that it's happened. And as organizations scale, of course, and you mentioned the magic 50 and 100 numbers, and for anyone who's involved in rapidly scaling an organization, the communication and the culture fundamentally changes, and without the right systems and processes in place, that can become a real problem, because the people at the top of the organization might think that communication is happening in the way they perceive it, but those coffee conversations aren't happening across 1,000 people, are they? So really, really interesting. And you mentioned, of course, we've got a few minutes into this today without mentioning AI, but we've mentioned AI now, so let's dig into that. We're going to go there. Let's talk about AI for a minute. It's everywhere right now, as of course everybody on this call likely knows, unless you've been somewhere very remote for a while. And it's used a lot as a buzzword. I see a lot of noise about AI and people making very grand claims about it. But in a practical sense, in your words, Ronan, and in the work that you're doing, what does AI-driven personalization actually mean in the context of what Dosen's doing in employee development? Can you share a few insights on your perspective on that one?
Yeah, of course. I think there's probably a couple of kind of fundamental ways that I think about AI that kind of ground what we do or how we do it, and I advise people to kind of think about AI this way. I think the first one is, if you think about AI as being an unlimited number of the smartest interns you're ever going to have. They know everything that there is to know in the entire world, but they're interns. And so they have no context about your organization. They don't really understand, how the working world works. This is their first time in a business. They're going to come in a pair of shorts because they think that's okay. They're just going to do things that, you're like, what? How did you not know that wasn't okay? But all this other information. So I think of AI as that, like you just have an unlimited volume of people that are the smartest in the world, but also need incredible levels of guidance to just, be able to function. And so your role is really to just guide them and direct them. And so you've got to be remarkably prescriptive in how you go about doing that. And if you give vague inputs, if you ask an intern, hey, knock me up a report there for the boss, please, they'll knock you up a report and it will probably be rubbish. But if you give them quite specific direction and guidance, they will create something that's really powerful. And that's kind of what AI is, in my opinion. So it doesn't just do everything for you. It can only be as good as kind of what you ask it to do, number one. And then number two, I don't think your business challenges changed the day AI became a thing. Like AI has been around for years and years and years. It's just now in a more kind of it's structured in a fashion which is more easily kind of adopted by the likes of us. But your business challenges remain the same. You still have to produce your product. You still have to go to market. You still need to develop a strategy. You still need to hire good people. You still need to maintain good people. All of those things still exist. And so just buying AI and giving it to people doesn't change those, and people might figure out how to add some value in those areas. But really what you're trying to do is solve the same problems, but now you just got this new tool to do it with. You've got this team of some of the smartest interns in the world that is supporting you in doing it. So the way we think about AI in the context of Dosen is we kind of want you to not have to think about it. We have done the thinking for you. And so when you use Dosen, you're instantly working with Elliot, your AI assistant. And Elliot has been trained and developed in a way whereby she is helping you to solve the challenge of people debt, the challenge of scaling your people, the challenge of organizational alignment, the challenge of educating all of your people and training them, and all of those things. So that's Elliot's role. You don't need to worry about the AI component of this. You just interact with Elliot, and what'll happen is something that used to take 200 hours, like that's about 150 to 200 hours is the average to build your own custom training program internally. Elliot can help you do that in about 15 minutes. And so that's the power of AI. But for you, you should still be supporting Elliot with the same inputs. Like, what are you trying to build? Who is it for? What's the purpose of it? What do you want them to be able to do afterwards? This is stuff you would have thought of anyway. But now Elliot can do the hard work. 159 and a half hours of the 160 you would have spent is now taken up by Elliot. So that's how I think about it. AI is incredibly powerful, but takes guidance. And then if you're just buying AI for AI's sake, magic's not just going to happen. You're still trying to solve for a problem, and that's where AI can support you. So that's how we think about it in the way that we've built Dosen. And I was even slow to begin with to even have AI in our materials, because I was like, it doesn't matter. Like we don't talk about how we use Java. Like, so why do we talk about the fact that we use AI? But I realized in this moment, it's important for people to distinguish between what platforms are kind of AI powered and not. But yeah, that's how we think about it. And so if you don't have the problem that we solve, I actually just recommend people don't work with this. Don't assume just because AI is in our technology, it's going to improve things. If you don't have that problem, you don't need it,
100%. And I've always said that technology needs to do two things. It needs to be simple to use and to make your life better. And so otherwise, you have to ask why you're using it. And I love the way that you described AI there as an intern as well that needs a certain wrap around to make sure that you use it wisely and with impact, and it does what you want inside your organization. And you've obviously given a huge amount of thought to that. I want to move us on to talking a little bit about mentorship and social learning, as it's sometimes referred to. I see this getting implemented in lots of different ways in different organizations. I'd be interested in your views, Ronan, on what you see as the main friction points in organizations around mentorship and social learning environments. I don't know if it's your experience, Ronan, but I won't name any particular organizations, but I often hear people say things like, when I'm asking about professional development and how it happens in organizations I work with, I've heard a similar phrase several times that always makes me smile, because I've had people say to me, oh, professional development, that's done to me here. It's just about compliance, i.e. have you done the minimum legal things you've got to do? And it was the phrase done to me that really sort of resonated with me. I was thinking, wow, I'm not sure that's particularly progressive or effective learning and mentoring and coaching inside an organization. What do you see as the main friction points in that context around mentorship and social learning?
Yeah, it is funny. I think it's almost a game at this stage to see how quickly you can complete training and learn as little as you possibly can. You know, it's like, what's the minimum amount of brain power I need to give this to pass, and then just get the thing. And what a waste! Like, what a waste of everyone's time and money to have gotten to that point. So, yeah, unfortunately, there is a little bit of that. But then on the flip side, when people want personal or professional development, like, there's a huge hunger there, you know, to advance themselves. So, yeah, it's a strange mix. The way we kind of think about it is where I ultimately would like organizations to get to, and this is what we want to help them to achieve, is that learning and development becomes a marker that determines an individual's success. And so today, if you were to sit down and you were to choose to promote someone in the team, you would look for markers and inputs and signals, and you'd be like, okay, well, let's check how they did on their goals for the year. Okay, Ronan, he got 5 out of 5 of his goals, and Jamie only got 3 out of 5. What else do I have? I might talk to some people, and you know, and I have my own sense. But like, the inputs are mostly around performance and just a bit of gut feel. I think learning and development should be an input. And so if you knew that even though Ronan got 5 of his 5 goals completed, that he was not mentoring anybody, he had been asked to do 3 training courses, he completed one of them and got a 40% and not done the other 2. And then you go to Jamie, and Jamie got 3 out of 5 in his goals, but actually he's mentoring 2 people in the organization. He's completed 3 training programs that are mandatory. He's asked for additional development, and he's halfway through a personal development course. Like, does he not look like a much stronger manager than Ronan does? Of course he does. But we don't have that input today. It's not a marker that's available. So we want learning and education and development to actually be a marker with which managers and organizations can make decisions. Now, once that happens, there'll be a shift in people's mindset, which is, I'm not looking to get 40% and learn as little as I can. I'm not going to get that promotion if I don't develop myself. And so you'll start to see people take more accountability over their learning, and be more forceful. Because I would say today, you kind of have this 20-60-20 rule. 20% of people really care about their learning and development. 20% of people are never going to care. And then 60% of people are influenceable. It's the same with anything in life. And so you really want to tap into that 60% and get as many of them to really be engaged as possible. So that's kind of where I'd like learning to get to. And we're doing our best to kind of support organizations in getting there. But a lot of this requires socialization. Like, it can't be you just doing learning or training on your own, or doing it secretly almost. You know, there's an element of that within organizations as well. This has to be transparent. It has to be clear and clean. You know, there's got to be no hiding behind this. It's, you know, and the sooner you do that, the sooner now it just becomes part of the organization's culture and structure. And that's really what we're trying to support people with. And on the mentorship side, the nut we cracked with it wasn't actually particularly complex. What we did was, the single biggest gap we found was that people didn't know what to talk to their mentor about. This sounds ridiculous, but they would have one call, and they would have this incredible conversation and cover 6 different topics and come away and then think, I don't know what else to talk to them about. I kind of covered everything, right? You know, and there's no real structure around it. And that's kind of almost in the definition of mentorship. So what we did very simply was allow the organization to set the objectives. You then get the mentee to choose the objectives. You get mentors to determine which objectives they have experience in, can help others. We then use AI to do the matching. Now you're being matched with someone who could support you, and the objectives you chose, you're now accountable for them, and you've got to work your way through them individually with your mentor and tick them off as you go. So you've now created structure around something that is still in control for the mentee, and it made a huge, enormous change. So for us, it's more about kind of socialization, making learning a marker for success within an organization. And that's really the key for this. And then the way our platform is built is just to make it more gamified and fun and social, and not, again, one more analogy for you. If you had to build a website 6 years ago, you probably would have hired a website developer. You would have set a bunch of requirements. You would have gone back and forth for a few weeks, handed it over. 5 weeks later, they'd come back. Then you've done it, right? 3 months in, you've got your website. Today, you just go to Claude and you say, "Hey, Claude, I need a website." And in 15 minutes, you've got a website. It's probably 80% of the way there. And that's fun and it's quick. That's how we think about learning. That's why I say we're Claude for training. With Elliot, you can build something in 15 minutes and it's not this cumbersome project to try and get a program built. And again, all of this just starts to reduce the barrier to entry, if that makes sense. Makes it much easier. Now you can build multiple programs. You can now ship them to people that can be role specific. So anyway, that's kind of how I think about it. Is let's socializing it, making it, bringing it out of the dark, making it a real marker for success. I think is the key thing.
Absolutely. And another lens on what you were just talking about there is to think of it in terms of unlocking internal expertise as well, because I was listening to you and I was thinking one of the big takeaways from what you're describing, to me anyway, is about how Dosen enables leaders to unlock expertise in new ways inside an organization. Because one of the problems that I've seen in my career, working with lots of different organizations that are looking at how to lead transformational change and business continuity and all that stuff, is a lot of people get nervous about what happens if their top guns leave, as they often say. Right now, there's a separate debate about whether there should be anyone other than top guns in an organization, because surely everybody should be your star player, and maybe we'll dig into that a little bit. But I'm interested in sort of how the work you're doing at Dosen helps leaders to stop having any anxiety about what happens if all the knowledge trapped inside somebody's head walks out the door, because this is a very real problem, I think, that a lot of people worry about but don't talk about very often, actually. How do you speak to that agenda, Ronan, in terms of what Dosen's doing, and how do you kind of solve that one?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's funny. We either see people mention this to us, like they'll actually have had this experience, or it's happening and they haven't even realized yet. Like there is no other version of this, because when someone's in your organization, they are constantly learning, gathering information, they're institutionalizing knowledge in their heads. But your company is just a collection of people. My old boss used to say this to me, like, you are your brand. So you are your company, and the collection of all your people is what makes up your company and your culture and skill set and the product. And so some people just have more experience, have more involvement, have learned and understood the organization better than others. So it's not even that they're your best people per se, but they're the ones that you always lean on when something breaks or something goes wrong. You're trying to figure this difficult thing out. And every organization has them. And they're the ones that if you lose, the glue becomes much more unstuck. And that's when, you start to kind of lose even the connections within an organization. Just some people are, what's that term, where they're the central fulcrum and they're connected to lots of others. So we do get this a lot, and there's a fear that this information is just kind of walking out the door. The way we solve this with organizations is, and just to take one step aside to explain how Dosen works, the way we work is, I mentioned kind of Claude for training. On Claude, you connect and integrate with areas of data and information. It's the same thing on Dosen. And so if you have SharePoint or other locations where your kind of documents and information is stored that you want to use for training and learning, we just integrate in and pull that data down. So it's very easy for you to be able to access it. The problem with this information is that it's in people's heads. And so how do you get that out? And we started to interview people. And so we started to have organizations ask them all of those questions, like how they do their job and what are the stickiest things that people ask them about, and all of that knowledge and experience. And you can transcribe it from the interview, from the call, and then you can upload that essentially into Dosen, and that can start to become an input into the programs that you're building to educate others. And so if one person is an expert on, how your marketing engine works, like unlock all of that through conversations with them, and then upload that into Dosen, and then build your marketing training from that. And so now you're actually educating people on all of the knowledge, the institutional knowledge that once resided in one person's head, and ultimately you're now de-risking your organization. So yeah, fortunately that's something that we can now help people to solve for, Jamie.
Brilliant. Love it. Thanks for sharing your insights on that, Ronan. I want to zoom in on a couple of buzzwords really that I hear a lot. One's micro-learning, and then how that relates to deeper skills acquisition as well. So we've seen a massive push, certainly everywhere in our world at the moment. There's a lot of micro-learning going on, and you've already mentioned gamification as well, which is another term that we hear a lot about. How in your view should learning and development teams balance quick, just-in-time micro-learning approaches with the need for greater foundational skill acquisition? Because there's a bit of maybe a tension or a balance to be had there. What are your thoughts on that?
So I something we do with every company that we work with before we kind of kick off is we build something called a learning framework with them. And the learning framework is actually something that everyone on listening to this probably already has, but you have it in your head. And it's really just the portfolio of training and development and learning and compliance programs that you have in your organization today. But you probably don't have them all in one place, on one sheet, and one view. So what we do is we essentially work with organizations to create this framework. And it's a little bit like a pathway for your people. It starts with new people, then into your kind of individual contributors, your high performers, managers, leaders. You're really trying to move your people through that life cycle. You want them to continue to advance and not lose them out of the organization. But to do that, they need support, they need education and training and learning. And that's where the programs come in. And each of those different kind of stages requires a different set of programs and learning. And so when you think about it in that context, and if you can visualize that, you now will be able to spot really quickly where you've got gaps or you've got nothing. I was just on a call literally an hour ago with an organization that did a huge amount of work to educate their people on AI, and now they've realized that their leadership has been left behind. And so they're now struggling to be able to give guidance and to be able to utilize and reference the tools that they've been telling people to use, because they had a huge gap within their framework on the leadership side. All of their effort was kind of was weighted toward the kind of the performers within the organization. So that framework essentially is a really strong way of just spotting anywhere you've gaps, and you have the right mix. Like, is it all role excellence? You do need a little bit of L&D in there. Like, you got to have something around kind of performance, culture, communication skills. Is it all for individual contributors? You got to educate your managers on how to manage people. So like, you'll spot gaps really quickly. Once you have that framework, I now think that is your kind of your map for empowering your people and educating your people and keeping everyone aligned. Now you get into micro learning within that, Jamie. So within the context of each of those programs, which of these needs to be something big, which can be nice and small, which needs to be mentorship or coach or buddy based, which needs to be programmatic and course based. Now you can start to pick and choose. And so we're big fans of micro learning because it's a very simple way of just getting something across and not being overbearing. If every program is 4 hours long, you're just going to lose people. So, but within the context, you've got to have some grounding. So I would say onboarding can't be a micro-learning experience. It's got to be the history of the company and a description of the different departments within the organization, what your product does, who your customers are. Like, it's got to be all of that really rich, but maybe product kind of learning can be shorter, and it can be kind of almost release based. So that's a micro learning opportunity, but it's totally up to you. But once you have your framework, it really quickly starts to tell you the story of what you need and what's missing. And that's kind of part of what we do as well, is we're able to help you understand what you do today versus what good in class looks like. So what are your peers doing? What are your competitors doing? And then also what your people want. Like, is there a form of learning that they really like? What was the best training they ever got? And you can use that to create your framework, and then you start to kind of work against that. So for me, I think microlearning is great. I think course-based are great. I think mentorship, great. It's all great, but you just want to build your overall learning framework in a way whereby you're not leaning too much on one, or your expectation of something has no chance of delivering. And until you see the framework in front of you, it can be a little bit difficult, but you're probably reacting to things that people are asking for, or just seeing opportunities appear randomly, and you're like, oh, let's buy that, or oh, that'll solve that problem. That just starts to get too difficult to manage. So yeah, so that's kind of our thinking on the overall how you educate your organization as a whole, and then where micro learning kind of plays a role within that.
Brilliant. You've sort of almost started to touch on some themes I want to dig into now about characteristics of outstanding organizations that you see in this space, because I asked you earlier about some of the gaps and some of the weaknesses, if you like, that you saw in the market, and hence you brought Dosen to the marketplace. And I'm going to guess now, but it's a guess based on a lot of experience, so I'm sure this will probably resonate with you, Ronan. But I'm imagining that given how progressive and how brilliant the Dosen platform is, a lot of the people that come to you are probably very progressive, rapidly scaling organizations that have a very strong leadership and are doing an awful lot right. So my question now is a little bit of a more positive one, really, in some ways, which is from your experience of working in the vanguard of practice in this area, what do you see in terms of insights of organizations that are doing things differently around onboarding and enablement that's really working incredibly well compared to those organizations that might today be stuck in legacy situations that they're not very happy with? But what could you share in a more positive sense of like what you see from the organizations that are really doing some awesome work in that space?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but actually, just so you know, we're approached by organizations of all different kinds. Like, some of them haven't even made the transition out of paper,
really,
to digital. Yeah, because the line that we see, it's not that it's like, oh, organizations of a certain kind of developmental stage or comfort with AI, they're the ones that are going to reach out to us. It's not. It's actually just organizations that realize they need the structure, and that they need to be better able to support their people. They're at some form of growth. That could be in terms of increasing headcount or decreasing headcount. It could be an attempt to grow revenue. It could be increasing their geographic footprint, their product suite. Any of those things is a moment where organizations generally kind of go, you know what, this is the moment that we need to do this, because if we don't, we're going to carry this tech debt too far, or it's going to pull us back and we're not going to scale. So that's really the line that connects all of our organizations. So there's never really, I don't want anyone to think, ooh, we're not ready for that yet. Even the organization that I mentioned that like didn't even digitize, they're still on paper, they're just kind of going to skip that and jump into the world of AI. So they're going to move into a world without following that path, which is perfectly easy to do. So that's kind of number one. I would say in terms of the organizations that are kind of more advanced or doing kind of really interesting things, I would just say the most interesting are those that embrace this, that are not trying to solve a small problem, that are not reacting to someone with all the knowledge leaving the company, or someone who's a star performer saying that their development isn't good enough, or they're not just reacting to something that is causing kind of short-term pain. They're all in, and that's when it gets really interesting, because if you step back and build that framework in a way which supports the organization you want to be, that's really interesting. And within it, you'll see where you've got some programs that exist and that are good. You've got some programs that exist that are out of date. And then you have gaps because you don't have programs that you need. Or you see opportunity to support people in getting from one stage to another. That's when it gets really interesting. So truthfully, the kind of the content or the form of the learning is less interesting to me than those that go all in it. And then it starts to become a cultural thing, because now they've got the framework, they can share it with their people. the people see the opportunity to progress because they're seeing what it looks like later on in the framework. They've got their own development pathway. Because we're leveraging AI to such an extent, it already feels like it's much more modern and almost kind of, for some organizations, a little futuristic in terms of like Elliot, our AI assistant, will take you through like a simulation in certain instances. So like you actually get to engage with Elliot and answer queries, and Elliot's challenging you on the content that you just learned. So it's really cool. But it's more that it's engaging the entire organization. So I think they're the ones that are really, really interesting to us. And then I think the other piece now as well is, because we've reduce the amount of time that it takes you to build a custom program from 200 hours down to, let's say, 2 hours. It gives you a huge amount of time that you can invest in the program that you otherwise couldn't have. And so we've seen this with one organization, I hope Wendy won't mind me name checking them, but RDP out of London and LA. They did a really nice job of basically interviewing the senior leaders, including Wendy, like 30, 40 minutes Q&A. But there are questions that they knew people didn't know the answers to. And then they upload those videos into the programs. And so now when you're consuming your learning, particularly with onboarding, you're hearing from Wendy about the history of the company. You're hearing about why it's called what it's called. You're hearing about when Wendy joined and, you know, her journey through the company. Like, that's inspiring. That's the stuff that's really, really interesting to you. And that's the context, particularly within the context of onboarding. Like, you want someone to feel like they belong. You want them to feel like you share their purpose and their mission. You want them to feel like they can self-educate and bring value really quickly. That's the way that you do it, you know, by hyper-personalizing, using your own people as heroes within the training content that you're delivering. So that's really, really cool. Again, it took 2-3 hours. You know, like, this is not a huge lift for organizations to be able to do it. So you can start to get more creative when you win all of that time back. So that's some of the more interesting things for me. And then we just see huge levels of engagement from people that go through that program. And then Elliot also serves them in kind of a generative AI fashion. So they can query Elliot after the fact. Anything you've used to build your programs on Dosen, it's like you've just trained your own ChatGPT internally. And so we see lots of activity and we see all the questions. And so now we're understanding what people are curious about within their organization. That obviously feeds back into the programs and back to the organization to help them understand what needs to happen next. So that kind of loop is also really interesting. But yeah, there's some cool stuff happening. We're at very early stages of this. So like, we're not even the ones bringing these ideas to the table. We're seeing the companies we work with be incredibly creative with the platform that they have now and the tools that are available to them. So in a week or two, Jamie, I might have an even better answer for you when we see more people getting creative.
A pretty damn good answer anyway, Ronan. And one of my big takeaways from what you were sharing there was that no matter where an organization is actually on its journey scaling up and growing, Dosen applies. You know, Dosen can solve the kind of problems that they might be facing. We've got this far without mentioning money, so it's time for us to talk about ROI. I think it's always going to be in the background somewhere, no matter how excited somebody gets about a wonderful platform that appears to solve their problems. So my next discussion topic really is about ROI, and certainly on learning and development areas. Historically, I personally know quite a few people actually who have struggled historically to know how to build a business case to demonstrate ROI in this area, which I think is possible. And I think you are very much have a significant expertise in this area. So my question relates to that, really, about what tangible business outcomes should leadership teams be tracking, in your view, to measure the true impact of their learning strategy? Because I think Dosen can speak to that really, really well. If you can share your thoughts on that, Ronan.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'll kind of just go high level and then come back in to answer the question. The way we think about measuring the impact of learning, which includes ROI, there's something called the Kirkpatrick model. I know you're familiar with it. I'm sure others on the call will be too. And if you're not, have a look at it. It's really, really interesting. But it's essentially a method for measuring the impact of kind of learning and education. And there's 4 stages to it. You know, the lowest level would be, it made me feel good. You know, next level up is it educated me. Next level up is I proved that it educated me. And then next level up is kind of almost I can show you in a monetary fashion quantitatively that there was a positive impact because of me learning. That's a very crude description of it, but in short, you can see how like the kind of requirement of the measurement gets stronger as you go up. So we've used the Kropatschek method a lot, and it's incredibly difficult to do. So to prove a quantifiable dollar impact because of something that somebody learned is very difficult. In some contexts, it can be easier. Sales team, you educate someone on how to sell quicker. They start selling quicker than they previously would have. You now win the number of days it took them, to sell quicker. So there's methodologies there, but it's really difficult to do it. I haven't seen any platform that does this well today, to be honest with you. We've kind of gotten to level 3 on the Kropatschek model, which is really impressive for us. And what we've started to do is we now display ROI within your insights dashboard on Dosen. And ROI is an algorithm which is pulled directly from where we can guarantee and stand over the value that we're bringing. And if we can't, it's not included in the algorithm. And we're going to continue to add to this as we can kind of prove or unlock more. But right now, essentially what we do is we can prove to you that there is efficiency gains in building your learning on Dosen versus building it off Dosen. And we measure that, and then we bank it. And so every time a program is built, you're saving hours of time of your team. And so we're going to bank that, and we could show you by building on Dosen, you've saved this amount of time and it was worth this amount of money to you. Elliot and people's ability to interact with Elliot, we know that today people spend about 1.5 hours to 2 hours searching for or reproducing information that already exists in your company. It's a frightening amount of time. Every time they ask Elliot a query, if Elliot answers successfully by pulling from the data sources that you've connected her with, we know that we've saved them an amount of time and we bank it. And so your ROI model basically is primarily an efficiency saving right now. We know, because science says, if you build a strong learning framework, you're going to reduce churn by 34%. You're going to increase productivity by 5%. We know that there's value being had there. I can't quite prove it just yet, but we will continue to unlock that and start to pull it back into our ROI model. So our ROI model today, even though we display it on the Insight dashboard, is probably 20% of all the value being gained, but we're still confident enough that you're going to bring such value by building your learning framework correctly on Dosen that you're still going to end up returning more value than the cost of doing this in the first place. So that's kind of how we think about it, and that's how we do it today. And again, this is all about transparency from our part. And we just think that's incredibly important because ultimately we all have bosses. We all need to balance the books. And so a business case is necessary when you're investing in any type of work within your organization, any type of platform. So we're really aware of that. And that's also something we do. We support organizations in their ability to almost like build that business case, because we can do a little assessment to understand where they're at, where they could get to, and what the ROI of that would be. And then we can give that back to the organization. Say, like, that's the ROI of you doing this on Dosen. If that number isn't big enough, you shouldn't do it. But if it is, well, then you absolutely should. And you should do it with us or with somebody else. So that's how we think about ROI, Jamie, and that's kind of where we've gotten to. But it's we're not there yet, I would say, and certainly no one else is.
Yeah. Brilliant insights as ever there, Ronan. And you've touched upon there as well some of the questions that we've had come through as well. So we may or may not dig into those at the end, depending on time, because at the moment we're absolutely perfect for time. So let's see if we can wrap up exactly as to plan. So the final question from me before we just wrap up is really about looking ahead and next steps, really, in terms of if somebody either watching this now live or watching it later, if they're thinking about, well, my current setup isn't really fit for purpose in terms of anything that Ronan's been talking about today and all these great things that Dosen is doing, what would you recommend they should think about in terms of the first 2 or 3 things on their mind in terms of critical steps they should take to evaluate where they are now and also modernize their workplace learning practices? So I suppose, how should they think about next steps is the question.
Yeah, and this is always tricky because I'm sure there's people here going, this sounds cool. I know I need to do this. I have a meeting in 9 minutes. I'll put it on my to-do list, the Q5 objective. I would say give me 20 minutes, chat to me, and see if we can help you to do that. Because what we do with organizations today is lots of people are in that position when I chat to them. We can do something very simple called a learning practices review, which essentially, by answering a 15-minute survey, we can map for you what your learning framework should look like based on what all of your peers are doing, based on what good in class and best in class looks like, based on what your people are looking for, based on what we're seeing out elsewhere. So we can map a framework for you, and we can tell you if you have gaps anywhere today, and we can tell you the ROI of bridging those gaps. And this is a very short doc, like 12, 15 slides, let's say, but incredibly powerful. Now, if you use that to decide you want to work with us in Dosen, fantastic. If you don't, and all it does is educates you and gives you kind of some next steps, well, that's totally fine as well. But I would say that's probably the best starting point, because it's a low level of effort on your side, and it's something we're really happy to do, and it should give you a very clear understanding of where there are gaps, where you might have risk, where there's opportunity, what the size of the opportunity is, and then from there, I think you can kind of go forth and conquer. But I think that's the simplest thing, because anything else you're probably going to start to do in a silo. And it's going to be cumbersome, and it's going to take a lot of effort, whereas we've got this down to a T. So the short answer, Jamie, is I would say just find time with me, and we'll set up time, and I can take you through a practice review. And at that point, I think you'll have a really strong plan in front of you to act upon as you see fit.
I think that's a hell of an offer to end on, actually. So that would be certainly 20 minutes of time really well spent, I think. So for anybody who is either watching this live or is catching it later, I'll ensure that my colleagues on the call share your contact information, Ronan, and how to get in touch with the Dosen team to take you up on that offer, because I can't think of any reason why somebody wouldn't, actually, in terms of the value they'd be getting out of that and the expertise, and also something to reflect on in terms of solving some of the problems they've got as well. So I think that's an incredible offer. We've got just a couple of minutes before we're to time, so I am going to go back to just one of the questions that we've had come in. You sort of almost touched upon this, actually, in a previous answer. It relates to employee retention and turnover and the impact of that on an organization, and how Dosen can speak to that, because I know that certainly an awful lot of leaders that I know and have met on my journey, they will often talk about retention. In fact, they monitor loss, retention figures and staff turnover a lot. And they often, I've heard a lot of people raise concerns about it, but I don't hear many people talking about really effective, impactful solutions to address it. So what are your thoughts on that as a final comment, really, in terms of how Dosen might address some of those concerns that some leaders might have about losing people?
Yeah, I think I don't know if we're all aware of the data, but the science is absolutely clear. If people do not feel that they're learning or supported in their learning and work, they will leave your company. You will retain 34% more people if they are happy in how they're learning in their work. Like, just nothing to do with us, just science. So that's an absolute no-brainer. And I think we're all aware of that as well, because we all are also people in our own organizations, and we all also feel similarly. There used to be something we spoke about a lot as well, called quiet quitting. It used to be the case that you would see the churn. You might not even be seeing the churn anymore. You might just have people in your organization that are operating at about 40 or 50%. Which arguably could be more dangerous than churn. So just be aware of quiet quitting. It's silent, it creeps up, and it's not until you look around a room and you kind of see, kind of dead eyes when you're talking about something that you thought would excite people, and you're like, uh-oh, I think we're there now. So just be really careful of that. But I would say a couple of things. I think, one, if people can see that they're on a path to progression, and there's opportunity and there's learning along the way, it's enormously important. I used to have this problem in one of my companies. We hired very quickly at one period, and people's sense of progress got attached to the number of people that they hired or the number of people on their team. And if they weren't hiring more people, they felt like they weren't progressing. It's this massive growth. but that stops at some point, and all of a sudden, there's now no roles to get promoted into. There's no more roles for you to be hiring into your team. And so people felt very stagnant. But that wasn't true at all. They were just in these roles that they had massive opportunity for growth within. They should have been in the same job for the next 3 years and getting much better at it. They should have been looking to keep their headcount, not grow their headcount and make the team even stronger and deliver more with the same number of people. So I'd say, again, that framework is a really strong methodology for showing to people and saying, look, there's opportunity here. We're going to bring you on a journey and we're going to support you on it, which is really important. So just having a framework, having a platform to show people, incredibly important. And that alone, even if the program is not good, you're making the effort and people will buy into that. And then the other one, and it's the oldest one in the book, and it happens over and over again. It's so funny. I'm laughing because I can't believe this has been solved. Onboarding today, people use as a tick box exercise. It's like, did you get your key card? Did you connect to the printer? Did you get your chair and your laptop? And then maybe go meet with someone. And all the organizations I've spoken to, some of them, this is one of them, their onboarding process is to speak with 15 different people in the company for an hour each. And there's no structure on what's shared with the individual. The 15 different people are different every time. And so it's a good way to meet people and kind of build relationships, but I don't know what you're learning out of that. Other organizations, I spoke to someone, she'd been in the company for 3 weeks. She was working remotely and had only met her line manager and her HR partner in 3 weeks. Wow. Had no context to the company. So onboarding and the early stages of any time someone's in a new role, in a new geography, that's an enormous opportunity for you to reduce the likelihood of that individual to churn by giving them context, history, the richness. I mentioned earlier that one of our clients who recorded themselves and put that down, make them feel like they belong in your organization. And you haven't missed the boat as well. We do this, we kind of almost backdate this a bit with some companies through something called a company alignment program. It's really onboarding under another name, but you can serve it to all of your people within the company. And it's a rehash. It's like, in case you didn't know, here's the history of the company. Here's what we do. Here's who our customers are. I can guarantee you everyone is going to take something from that. So, so for me, churn is huge. It's very hard to attach it directly to learning, as I mentioned earlier, with the Kirkpatrick model. So I'm not going to give you data other than to say, if you don't have learning in your organization, you're just going to struggle. And it's a very easy one to fix, like good onboarding, a good company alignment program, and just a learning framework. You're halfway there. You really are. And that's something you could probably do in about 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Look, thank you so much, Ronan. We're perfectly to time. Which is great, and you can see some kind comments coming in the chat as well. So I'm sure that all of my C-Learning colleagues will join me in saying a huge thank you for your time today and sharing your insights, your expertise. You are an extraordinary person doing extraordinary work, so we're very grateful for you sharing your insights and expertise today. And I'm sure all of our listeners here live, but also watching this later, will share that. So we will share your contact information with everybody who's signed up, including many people who couldn't make a live session. So we'll make sure that they've got your contact information to take advantage of that wonderful opportunity for 20 minutes of your time to just explore where they are and to give them some insights on what could be possible in terms of moving forward. But for now, it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to you, Ronan. I think you're absolutely awesome what you're doing, and I really, really do appreciate your time today. So thank you very much. And to my colleagues, they can stop the recording now and feel free to drop off the call. But thank you, Ronan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie.